Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 28th, 2025 Board of Education meeting. Sure thing. Could you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. James, would you take attendance?
Yep. President, geez, oh, Pete. President McDonough,
Here.
Vice President Aldred,
Yes.
Secretary Summers here, Treasurer Whitney,
Here.
Trustee Atchison,
Here.
Trustee Sarah Beth,
Here.
and Trustee Gibson.
Here.
I will work on your last name tonight.
Gibson?
All right. Item number 2, changes to the board agenda. I do have one. I would like to move to add item 7B, Policy Committee, to the agenda. Could I get support?
Yes.
Mike Aldred, thank you. Any discussion?
What is this for? Just an update, or we're not doing any first readings tonight, right?
We would be doing a first reading tonight. We just had Policy Committee
Okay.
prior to this.
That, I have a problem with that, because you guys just did it, and I would be reading like off the cuff and trying to find out what you guys looked at and stuff, and I don't like that. That's just similarly to people coming up and presenting that night and having us vote on it. I know it's a first reading, but I don't think that's right. I don't think have we ever done that in the past?
Okay, that's fine. No, I think, is Ryan still here? Because that's okay with this law, if we did first reading.
The law will go into effect on February 21st either way.
So we still have 2 meetings, February 21st, you said?
The law is effective February 21st, so we'll have everything in operation, and then we'll adopt,
It would be the 25th that we would adopt.
25th.
So we'd have the first reading before then, it would go into operation, and then we would essentially ratify or approve the policy afterwards? Okay. All right. Yeah, yeah. And I might be a solo person on that, that's my feelings and my thoughts on that discussion. Especially because is it multiple pages?
It is, it's not a .01. It's straight from Troon reflecting the law change for Michigan earned sick time.
Okay,
And I completely respect that.
yeah.
I respect that opinion.
Is it uploaded in board book right now? Or not even in board book for us to look at?
On
So,
top.
so it's on policy, it's not even in our board book for this, okay. Yeah, I stand with what I said. I don't feel comfortable doing that today, but
Okay,
that's me.
okay. Well, we do have a motion, so would anybody else like to discuss, though, before? Okay,
So I guess my only question is this: if it is a law that regardless of what we decide or not decide, it's not a choice, we're not electing, we're not trying to create something, right?
Correct.
Now, regardless of what we do, this happens.
Yes.
And there's no major impact because we're already, in some cases, over emphasizing the guidelines in some cases.
Yes.
So we're already above the meeting requirements that are being enacted by this law.
For the majority of our employees, yes. And we'll have everything in place for the go live on the 21st, and then the policy will just follow on the 25th.
Thank you for the clarification.
okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I'm absolutely good if we push this one to the next meeting. So in that case,
move it,
uh,
or are you going to do that?
we can just vote on the motion now, we can just vote now.
We can either withdraw the
Or
motion.
we can withdraw.
Yeah, you can withdraw it, or we can vote in either way.
Okay,
That's
I'm
how-
sensing, unless anyone has any other opinions, I'm sensing that we could just withdraw.
To me, a first reading, but I'm not like, we need to have the first reading, so it doesn't matter.
Just withdraw the motion.
Okay. I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you.
All right, moving on to school presentations. We have Mr. Jeff Brown.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Brown. I have been the principal of Oxford Elementary School going on 16 years at this point. I am excited to share on behalf of all the people that you see on that screen behind me today. I guess I get the big picture as principal, but there's 40 additional staff members that are in that picture standing behind. If you look closely at that picture, I feel that picture is a pretty good representative of who we are as a staff. If you notice, you'll see Katie dressed as an elf. For those of you that have children at OE, when you did your drop-off that week, you noticed that Katie was on the roof outside the school in her Elf on the Shelf outfit. If you look really closely at that picture, you will also notice that we're all in our pajamas. We did do the Underground Spirit Week leading up to vacation in December, and so you can see just great staff participation. And while we, of course, have incredibly serious jobs, part of our job is making sure that kids are happy and comfortable and it's a fun environment where people want to be. And I think that picture does a pretty good representation of who we are as a collective group. I know that you're coming to visit OES in late February, but I wanted to take another minute and just tell you a little bit more about our building. We are made up of 13 traditional homeroom classes. You can see our number of students for our enrollment. Over my 16 years at OE, this is on the lower end of where our enrollment has been. We have at one point approached 500 students within the building, and we're a little bit more on the downside. I live in Waterstone. I'm optimistic as I look around my neighborhood that I'm seeing more little people running around, and I'm seeing some of the people that are my age starting to kind of get out of there a little bit, and so hopefully those numbers are headed in a growing direction. We also have 3 resource rooms in our building, and this is our first year having a classroom for children with more severe autism. And so we're growing and changing, and even though we're smaller, we don't seem to ever have any vacant rooms. They always seem to get filled with something unique or something special or something interesting. When I presented to you last year, it was a little bit later in the school year, and so we were actually presenting our goals for this year, and so I thought it would be appropriate as part of our presentation tonight to give you some updates sort of on where we are. The number one thing that I presented to you last year was our attendance numbers. On the next page after this, you'll actually see the data, but I wanted to give you a reminder of some of the things that we're doing to increase attendance over the course of this year. First, and just most basically, our classroom teachers are reaching out to the families when the kids get to 5 absences. The relationship between the family and the teacher, I think, is the most important one that we have in our building. And so for those families to hear from the teacher right out of the gate when attendance is becoming a potential concern, kind of one of the most basic things that we could do to keep families engaged with attendance. The second one is historically, and we've done this the whole time I've been in Oxford, parents get letters about attendance when they have 10, 15, and 20 absences. Prior to this year, we would send those letters on a monthly basis. So for example, if a child missed their 10th day at the beginning of the month and we just run those reports, we wouldn't be running another round of those reports for a month. Believe it or not, there were actually times where a child would go from 10 to 15 within that span, and then we're stuck as a main office. Do we send the 10 letter? Do we send the 15 letter? We don't know which is appropriate, and it always caused a lot of difficulty. One of the things that we've truly appreciated in our buildings is getting that extra half-time secretary in our main office. It's made a lot of things easier and more efficient. One of the benefits to that is we now send an email the minute the kid hits the 10, 15, and 20 absence. So there's no more lag in that system anymore, which I think is helpful for families. I think that immediate notification is important. The other thing that it's allowed us to do, we used to do attendance meetings anytime a family would hit 15, between the family school liaison, myself, sometimes classroom teacher, social worker, other trusted adults that were involved. And the way we used to do those is we would take a day every month or two and we would go through those meetings. But that also meant that there was a delay or lag sometimes with having those. We now do our best to schedule those as quickly as possible, typically within a week of when that 15 letter goes out. And I think that's another piece that helps just to make sure that people are aware as in as timely a way as possible. The other piece that I presented to you last year, I'm not sure, I don't have students in the office or in the audience, so I'll use attendance club is what we're calling it with adults. Pizza club is what we call it when we do meet with children. We identified kids who for the last 2 years had missed 15 or more days. So that's a pretty considerable amount of absences. One of the challenges with elementary school kids is they're not always the ones that are responsible for getting themselves to school. Sometimes they're at home because a parent couldn't get them there. Sometimes they might have overslept because they were the only one there. So attendance for my 8, 9, 10, and 11-year-olds is oftentimes at least a little bit outside of their control. And so you might wonder why we're calling it pizza club when it's something that kind of has a negative sort of connection to it. But our main points are, if you Google how to increase attendance right now, you get almost nothing. It's all over the place. There's nothing concrete. If there was a concrete plan, we would be doing it at Oxford Elementary School right now. But one of the things that's consistent in the literature is making kids feel connected, making them feel welcome. Pizza makes it fun. And so it gives them a reason to smile. When we show up in their class to pull them out for it, we were trying to kind of keep it quiet. We didn't know if kids would be embarrassed if they were part of it, and they jump out of their seat and they're happy that they're going to Pizza Club. Once they get there, there's a few different things that happen. First, we sit down in a circle and we just check in, how's it going? Welcome, we're happy to have you here today. The second thing that happens is Ms. Overholt, our family school liaison, does a lesson with them. The example that I put up there has to do with circle of control. So for example, if I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm sick, I don't really have a whole lot of control of that. If I choose to stay up late tonight and I play Fortnite and I'm really tired when I wake up tomorrow morning, I do have some control of that. And so we sat in the circle. There were a whole bunch of sentence strips that were cut up with different examples like that. Kids would draw one, explain whether they thought it was in their control or out of their control, and then put it back into the circle. So we wanted to make sure that there's an instructional component to each one of these meetings. The last thing that the kids do is the kids are tracking their attendance this year. Our goal is to have them miss less than 15 days this year. Obviously, our goal is for them to miss way less than 15 days this year, but we also wanted kids to be successful. Most of the kids that are on this list, to be completely transparent, didn't just miss 15 days. We have a lot of kids in this group who have historically missed 20 plus days. And so while 15 isn't an incredibly high bar, it is a pretty decent improvement from where some of these kids have been. So I want you to know that we are doing some things to tackle that issue from last year. And if you take a look, most of this data was presented to you last year. You can see the 18-19, so we're going pre-pandemic with that attendance rate. You can see our rock bottom, so this is both post-pandemic and post-30th. That is our worst number that I can present to you. I included last year's number just because I presented it to the board last time and I wanted to make sure that sat there. And then you can see our rate as of mid-December for this year. And so when you look at it, it's about a 1.3% improvement from last year to this. And I don't know, if you got a 1.3% raise, you'd be happy with it, but it wouldn't be life-altering. But 1.3% in this context is pretty significant. That represents 827 student days. That represents almost 5,000 instructional hours, which I think is pretty significant. And if we're to continue this pace over the course of the year, the average change for all students in the building would be 2.7 less absences over the course of the year. And I'm pleased to say, and I hope this number holds true, if you look at the students who are participating in the attendance club, it'll be a little bit over 4 potential impact. And so this is based on projections. I just did a quick multiplier to get from where we were in December to what I'm hoping it'll be at the end of the year. And so my fingers crossed that that'll hold true. But it looks like a promising trend, and so I hope that we're headed in the right direction with what we're trying to accomplish with attendance. And the main reason I wanted to keep putting attendance in front of you is personally I feel like it's the main thing that's impacting this next slide. We have a lot of good teachers in our district. We have tremendous teachers at Oxford Elementary School, but they are not so good that they can teach kids when they're not there. It's just not possible. So the second piece that I wanted to show you today was a little bit of our history of where Oxford Elementary School is at academically. And so I used the same years that were used for the attendance. And so just to make sure it was kind of an apples to apples piece. So if you look back to 2018, you can see the first set of scores are Oxford Elementary School in bold. You have the county, and then you have the state. Across the board in both reading and math, for all of the grade levels you can see in 2018-19, with the exception of one spot in 5th grade ELA, we are exceeding or tied with the county and state. I don't know, quick math in my head here, the 12 years that I've been at Oxford Elementary, prior to pandemic, that is very representative of what Oxford Elementary School looked like. I can guarantee you that it's been less than 5 times in my whole career at Oxford Elementary that we had any M-STEP score that was below the state average, and very rarely is it happening below the county average. Unfortunately, when you fast forward to that 21-22 year, again, we are coming post-pandemic, post-tragedy. This, for us, I hope, is rock bottom, and it'll definitely be rock bottom, at least in my career. You can see that we are below the county in several areas at that point. You can see that we are, even with the state, there may be one in there someplace that is even below the state at that exact moment in time. But again, the good spin to that is if you fast forward to last year's M-STEP scores, you're able to notice that we are back to being above the county and state in almost every area, which I think is a great sign. Everybody's talking about, are we back, where are we going? And it's nice to see that we are very much headed in the correct direction. I want to take 1 minute to explain what you see in yellow and then what you see in blue. So even if you look at what I'm calling the rock bottom in the 21-22 in yellow, the kids that are highlighted in yellow in 21-22 are the same students that are there in the 5th grade piece. And so if you notice, for example, in the 3rd grade ELA, those children were below the county average and barely above the state average. But if you fast forward a couple of years in their careers, they are now exceeding the county and the state by the time they left as 5th graders. So even that group that came in certainly lower than we would have liked, they finished headed in a fantastic direction. And that same thing can be said for the math. The other piece that you notice with the math that's in blue, you'll notice that the state average changed considerably from how many kids were passing in 3rd grade to how many kids were passing in 5th grade. But the delta between us and the county and us and the state increased for that group in math as well, which I think is a great positive thing. And I think it shows that over the course of those few years, not only were kids starting to recover and get back closer to normal, I do think we have to be honest with ourselves. Some of this was adult generated. It was kind of hard to be at school some of these days. I know our adults came and gave it maximum effort, but it wasn't always easy. And I think some of this has to do with the recovery of adults and some systems in place as well. But beyond the emotional piece, there were some other things that were added in this window that I do feel like really impacted academics at Oxford Elementary School. So one of the things at a Tier 1 level, an increased importance was placed on word study and phonics, even in the upper elementary grades. Prior to pandemic, that would not have been a high priority at Oxford Elementary School. That wouldn't have been an area that bubbled up in our data as being one of concern. With some of the challenges for instruction in that time period, phonics-based instruction was something that became a little bit more of a focus. The Tier 2 level, so children who are being pulled out of their classroom for assistance, we added win time during that time period. I know several administrators have made presentations on the win time. The short version of that is what I need. It's a 30-minute period that happens every day where no new classroom instruction is happening. And so all of our children that need reading and math support get pulled within that 30-minute window. That also lessens the load on the number of kids who are actually in front of the classroom teacher as well, and so that those students are able to get a little bit more of what they need during that time period as well. And so that was launched, I believe, 3 years ago, which falls very much in line when we started to see some improvement. We've always had great reading teachers in Oxford. We've also always had great pull-out reading teachers in Oxford. But over these last few years, we've gotten smarter at the medicine that we've been giving to kids. A lot less one-size-fits-all and a lot more prescriptive based on all the great assessments that we have to really make sure that that 30 minutes that the kids are outside of the classroom is targeted very precisely at what they need. I know you've heard what IRIPs are and all the reading plans. And I think this is a result of that we're able to really target specifically where kids are at that moment in time. And the last thing that I just wanted to do a quick plug for, when the pandemic came, we stopped doing our big research paper along with fifth grade exhibition. Fifth grade exhibition has still been a great thing, but the rigor was reduced just a little bit from not doing that report. I'm excited to share that we're going to be doing the reports again with this year's fifth graders. I think it's an important part of that process. I think it definitely raises the rigor quite a bit. And I also wanted to share, because I haven't seen you since pre-exhibition, we have added an art show to that. And so if you also noticed, we had art that was out in the community last year in the springtime and carried into the summertime. And so we're really working on spreading the word and the action of what our kids are doing within exhibition to really push and make that a bigger part of not just what we do at the school, because it's always been a huge deal at school, but to make it a little bit bigger deal in our surrounding community. I think that these 4 data points really go along very well with everything that you've heard so far tonight in terms of us being back, us setting a high bar, being proud of the building where we are. If you look at the 2023 data, those are all data points that have been presented to you before as being things that we were proud of. What I'm even more proud of is if you look at the 23-24 data, all of our areas that we were proud of before got better. I think that's a pretty neat thing. And in terms of talking about are we back and where are we at in recovery, the fact that we have 90% of families rating their OES education as high, saying that expectations are high, saying that students are challenged by their schoolwork, that's definitely one of the main things that we're all about. And it makes me happy to see that not only our families recognize it, they recognize it even a little bit more than what they were even just a year ago. The last one is up there because that was one of the things that was presented to you also last year. One of the things that we were working on was increasing parent involvement. As you can see, 95% of families either agreed or strongly agreed that OES encourages families to volunteer. To be totally transparent, we have more volunteers in the building than at any point in the 16 years that I've been at Oxford Elementary School. So not only are we back, we're by far exceeding the number of volunteers that we've ever had. And I wish I had like a hard data point to like prove that to you. I don't, but I can tell you from the eye test, we have way more people in our building than what we've ever had before. And not just there to watch a Halloween party. We have people that are actually there making positive contributions to all the kids that are there. And so we're incredibly proud of that data point. So I present this because I have to. We have to show you a challenge. We are not perfect at Oxford Elementary School, but I am at least a little bit proud of this one. I know that other buildings have presented this very same data point to you before. Discipline is fairly enforced. I want to make sure I explain this well because I know some administrators have changed the headings at the top, and so I just want to make sure that it's really clear why it's displayed this way. So 58% of people last year agreed that discipline is fairly enforced. So 42%, not good, 58% said we were doing okay with that. That number increased in the last survey to 78% of families saying they agree or strongly agree that discipline is being fairly enforced. But that's still 22% of families that say that this is an area of concern. I feel very confident with making this statement. We're never going to make everybody happy with how discipline is enforced. It's just not possible. But we did do some very concrete things over these last couple of years that I think has helped. One is a staff, we've developed our continuum of consequences. And so it's never going to be perfect when adults dealing with kids, but we've laid out pretty clear guidelines for what an adult response should be to a kid's issue. I think that's helped a lot. Our FSL level of support went from none to half-time in the building to full-time. A lot of behavior can be stopped if when the kids start to have a disagreement, we have an adult who can be there and be present and help guide them through it. It prevents the bigger things from happening that we would actually call discipline. So that FSL support has been, absolutely fantastic. I'll also take a minute with Mrs. Prince in the audience behind me, and I know I presented a lot of the data on adding the parapro last year, but being able to have that behavior support paraeducator has also been just a real benefit to us, to have an adult that can immediately on the spot always be able to help a kid process what's going on. And again, sometimes sending someone to that position proactively prevents them from getting into a potentially bigger situation. And as you probably remember, just from December when we recognized our students, we have another piece that we're just now adding where we're going to have students trying to support each other with behavior. We do take a lot of time at Oxford Elementary to make sure that we're getting and keeping track of our student voices as well. We do the Olveus survey, which is that national level survey. We also have our own in-house survey that we do as part of our PBIS program. And so these numbers that you see here are coming from our PBIS number. Now, I'd like to tell you that 100% of kids like coming to school every day. I wish sometimes that I had the K2 kids in the building because I think they would help bump that number up a little bit. And if I could just move my 5th graders to the middle school, I think the numbers could be even a little bit better. But I will say as our kids get to upper elementary, sometimes Fortnite might win out over wanting to come to school that next morning. But I will say that 70% is very consistent over the last few years. It's up a little bit over our 60-something%, I think, that was reported out last year. And so that number has been pretty consistent. I'm very proud to share that 94% of students report that we have clear rules. That's something that we've been working on really hard over these last few years. And the ultimate thing, and the most basic thing, 95% of students reported that adults, that teachers are treating them with respect. We do have to deal with challenging things sometimes, but it can always, 100% of the time, be done with respect. We do have some challenges that we're working on, and both of these connect back to something that was presented to you last year as well, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in just a second. 31% of students said that they're still having trouble with kids inviting them to play games at recess. 39% of students reported that they're having a hard time solving problems on their own, which is where the program that came from that I showed you on the last slide, that's what's generating the need for that. So last year, towards the end of the year, one of the things that I presented to you was the PlayFit Recess program. If you remember, PlayFit, it was a set of organized games that we make available to kids. And I'm being really careful with my language. We make it available to kids. Kids don't have to play any of these things out there. Free play is still great. Running around the track, doing their thing, just hanging out and talking with buddies is still totally fine. But we did take the time to bring in Kurt Hinson from the PlayFit program at the beginning of this year. We had our first games day that we've had in probably a decade, where kids learned a whole bunch of games outside. We launched all this at the beginning of the year. We ran into a few roadblocks along the way, making sure that new aides were properly trained, making sure that we had enough support for it outside. It worked okay, but we need to do a new launch of it come springtime. As is obvious, when it's 10 degrees outside, kids aren't exactly raring to go and play all these different games out there. And so we have had to take a little bit of a pause here in the wintertime, but we are going to do a relaunch. And I think that program will still very successfully address both of the challenges that you saw in that previous slide. I talked about the student-led conflict groups already, and Oxford Elementary School was one of the pilot schools to formally introduce a program for the first 6 days of school. During that time, we went through rules and expectations, which, our kids are good, but they do need all of that information. But we also made sure that part of the first 6 days of school was all the fun stuff. So it was the PlayFit launch, it was our PBIS launch, the kids made their duct tape wallets, we introduced all the fun stuff that they could buy with that. The students met in circles multiple times throughout the day for those 6 days. It was a lot of get to know you type activities, because if you like the person next to you, it makes it easier to work with that person next to you. And so this is actually, I guess, kind of a curriculum that we've been developed that we should be able to just roll out again next year to help make sure that our kids are comfortable, that they know what expectations are, and the goal is to share that with the rest of the elementary part of the district here moving forward. And to conclude tonight, just a fun picture, but kind of a meaningful picture. For those of you that don't know Miss Williams, who is dressed as Santa in the very back center of that picture, she retired mid-year. For those of you that don't know Shani does and has done a lot of really cool things for kids over the course of her career. She's never been one of those adults that's looked for that public recognition for that, and I'm sure that there are countless stories from families and kids who would share examples that even I'm not aware of. But for those of you that knew Miss Williams, she's a little bit shy in front of a group. I know it's not obvious from that picture, but she's always been kind of a more quiet, more shy, more reserved person in these type of group settings. Leading up to her retirement, I believe that we'd had maybe our first snow day. Our schedule had been thrown a little bit off. Oh, no, let's see. I guess I'll share this, why not? One of our teachers who was supposed to run the sing-along had an accident on her drive-in and was not able to make it in that day. And so we canceled our school sing-along that was supposed to happen on the Friday. I was not aware that Miss Williams had this plan to be dressed up as Santa Claus and wanted to do all this stuff. And so I just said, look, there's no way, we can't put together a sing-along when we don't have the person with all the stuff. We just can't do it. And with about maybe an hour and a half left in the school day, Shani came in and said, but this is what I was planning on doing. This is supposed to be my last thing in front of kids. And we did our best. We put it together. We actually had a very fun sing-along. The only thing that missed was the staff skit. But all the rest of that day was able to happen. Shani ran around the cafeteria and jumped up and down and pumped the kids up. And we made sure that we got a great picture of it. But I think she's kind of one of those perfect examples of not every teacher is the face of the franchise. They're not always the ones that are out in front getting all that recognition. But even those more quiet teachers, as you can tell from the smiles on kids' faces, were still incredibly excited to send her off. And 3rd to 5th graders are old enough to know like what retirement means. And they were excited for her, and they were excited to show that. And I think it's just one of those small pieces that really sums up OES very well. And my last slide just says thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present to all of you. 16 years has been a while, and it's been an absolute blast, and it's always fun to have my moment of fame to get to share a little bit more about OES.
Thank you. Before we get to any questions, I do just want to reiterate congratulations to Shani. And I know you said she doesn't love the attention, but I do know she loves hugs. So thank you again for that. Congratulations, Shani, on your well-deserved retirement. Did anybody have some questions for Mr. Brown? Shane?
I don't have a question, I have more of a comment, if that's okay. I can tell you, where I grew up, we didn't have volunteers in the schools like we have here. I'm very impressed with the way that this community steps up and volunteers at our schools, to the point where I kind of get a little upset that when I go to volunteer, it's already filled. So I kind of feel like, oh man, I missed out. I can't do hot chocolate, or whatever it is. So it's amazing. You guys obviously have a very warm and welcoming environment there, and that gets a lot of community involvement. And I love that. Second point, if you don't mind, is the paw bucks. I can tell you, my son, the first thing out of his mouth when he comes home is how many paw bucks he got. And when I was able to volunteer, the one time it didn't get filled up on me, I was volunteering when they were able to cash their paw bucks in. And I was blown away at the fact that on the iPads, they were keeping track of who had how many paw bucks. And I thought that was more of a recognition, like, oh, you got the most, you were celebrated for getting the most. And one of the teachers explained to me that it was more of a tracking of who maybe didn't get as many, and not as to point them out like they're deficient, but how they can help raise them up. And I thought that was amazing. Like that warmed my heart. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for your staff. And just keep up the good work.
Anybody else? I did have a couple quick ones on attendance club. it looks like it's for their attendance record of the 2 previous years, right? So does that adjust for students real-time that may be missing this year? Do you pull them into attendance club as well?
Because this was the first year that we've tried this, we made the decision that the kids that were in attendance club on day 1 are going to be there until day 180 this year. And so we're not adding nor are we subtracting any kids who are being successful this year. I think it's something that we're going to look at next year of is it something that we want to do. But just to keep it simple in our first year, we've just stayed with the same cohort the whole way through.
Okay,
But yeah, very open to that idea and something that we've talked about.
okay. And you said this was a monthly meeting?
Yes.
And do they leave during win time? Or what part of the day do they?
Typically towards the end of a day on a Friday. I wish we could do it during wind time, but that would mean that Miss Overholt and I would have to be doing like potentially up to 13 different meetings to hit all the kids. And so the way we've typically done it is we've done a 3rd grade group, then a 4th grade group, then a 5th grade group, and it's typically been on a Friday afternoon.
Okay,
So yeah, they are missing a little bit of class time in order to get that.
gotcha, makes sense. Okay, I'm good. Well, thank you again very much. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
All right, moving along. Scheduled public comment. I didn't receive any, did you? No? Okay. And moving into the consent agenda, we have minutes, bills payable, and HR updates. Can I get a motion for that? James?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support? Shane, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And moving into superintendent's report, Dr. Milligan.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We have had a very busy couple of weeks. I want to start primarily talking about the phenomenal community forum that we had last week. We started our forum with a video because I wanted people to think about their why. Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? Why do we want a strategic plan? And I probably have to turn this on. You get me every single time, Aaron. Ha. All right. So this is a video that we showed to start the strategic planning forum. And it's our students. And we had an opportunity to hear their words and think about our why. So Aaron, if you could play this.
I think that something that would describe Oxford is exciting.
The best thing about being an Oxford Wildcat is probably like having a strong school and a strong school district.
The teachers are very supportive here, so are the staff.
The schools are very, very fun.
Lakeville is amazing.
I'm proud to be an Oxford Wildcat because of our strong community.
The school is all well knit. I feel super welcome here.
I would describe Oxford as being really creative and welcoming. It's how everyone includes everyone.
Kind, caring, principled. Our school district rewards people for being kind and caring.
There's so many people who are caring.
You can really be whoever you want.
I can just be myself.
I really like how our school really appreciates good behavior.
The 5 tickets just make you feel good. There's so many open-minded people here that whatever you say won't be judged.
The schools are very cool, like the paintings behind me and all around.
The lunches, they're nice, and the teachers are really nice.
I would definitely say we just have a great overall reputation.
with academics, sports, and just an amazing learning environment, and everyone's included. It's a great place to find new friends.
I really love the cafeteria tables that we got.
The dogs are my favorite part. Like, you do math, and then and sometimes you can show your mom and dad, and then they may be surprised, so I'm glad that I'm a DA Wildcat.
There's a lot of different opportunities that you get to have.
Whether it's band, swim,
The leadership program,
art club, acting, all of the IB units,
Drama club,
AP and IB classes,
robotics,
CS program,
early college,
Spanish, choir, musicals,
sports,
cheerleading.
basketball.
I'm looking forward to football and band. I'm very excited because my brother does band and I'm very excited. And he does football too, and I want him. My brother is a very cool guy, and yes, I would love to do those two things.
I think we can make the schools even better by having student council again and getting the students' opinion on what we do.
I would definitely improve the amount of tutoring programs we have, because I think another thing that would be great would be like 8th graders helping 6th graders with after-school tutoring programs that they could do if they actually need help.
And I don't like how when I'm sitting at lunch, I see everybody on their phone not even communicating anymore. That's scary.
Maybe adding somehow heaters outside in the winter.
I think the district can help support the students even more than they already do by really advertising more scholarships for college and really advertising other routes to go instead of just college. I think kids need more time to eat. If we could like have separate cafeteria and another gym, like have the gym open for like indoor recess, especially during winter time when it gets a little colder.
I would hope to add more like field trip opportunities, like different career centers or different not as well known careers to see if students would like to think about those careers in the future.
Something that I think we can do to make it improve is having teacher pause tickets so the students can nominate teachers.
There's the new exam policy put into place where like if you get certain absences, I do feel like for seniors, they should get like maybe like days that count. Because I feel like college tours are really important and sometimes it's hard to do it on a Saturday or Sunday.
A couple of things I'm hoping to keep in middle school and high school is the field trips, going to Cedar Point, Mackinac Island, and DC.
I hope we don't go all technology, but it's what's starting to be like that. I hope that students coming out from the elementary schools and middle schools will be able to feel like they belong and are able to participate in any of the clubs and sports that we have to offer.
I don't know, but I think that we could do like, sometimes we could like change the playgrounds and like put different things on them to make it like fun, like funner. Something I hope that the district keeps is like the mentor program for middle schoolers and like web day and like web leaders.
Something that I really hope that is really unique about Oxford that I really hope continues is Light Up Oxford with Love. It brings everyone together.
I hope that the half days never change because it makes people have something to look forward to at the beginning of the week. Actually, I don't know what we can make our schools better. Our schools are already pretty good.
Everything's perfect.
I don't think we would change anything. It's just like the way Oxford is.
Oh, this is a tough thing because I feel like this school is very, very good. I feel like I can't even think of any changes. It's so good.
I hope the younger students have the same positive experience that I had, and that Oxford stays the welcoming community that it is, and just makes students feel happier to come to school. I love just how like the community always steps up for each other. If it's academic, social, mental, anything, Oxford is always there for you.
I think the best thing about being an Oxford Wildcat is once a Wildcat, always a Wildcat.
I feel like Oxford is like that place where you might have went to it, but you're always a part of it, so you can always go back.
So that's probably the 7th or 8th time I've seen that, and every single time I start tearing up because the voices, our student voices, are so powerful and they say such incredible things. and we just need to make sure we're listening. And that is a part of the strategic plan, is we need to listen to our student voices. We need to lift those up during the community forum. We actually had several of our students on a snow day come to the community forum. So I was incredibly impressed that that happened. And then the next, happened just yesterday. We had our 8th graders at the high school. Miss Anita Conja Collins and myself were able to go there. And it was so moving to the point where Anita came back and we were talking through it, and she made the connection. She said, this is our why. This is why we do what we do. So I couldn't help myself. I had to put the pictures in and ask Anita to kind of speak to the 8th graders' experience going to the different programs in the high school.
So on my way out yesterday from the high school, I saw Mr. Bigelow in the hallway. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I am such a dork. I am so tearing up about this experience. It was so great." But we had over 300 of our rising, soon-to-be freshmen at the high school come to the high school yesterday, and you can see that they started their day with lunch provided by the high school. They started with a pizza luncheon. At the luncheon, they were able to meet the administration, the counselors, the FSLs, and just kind of get their eyes on who works at the high school. And then after that, they had 10 different sessions and rotations around the school to go to. And so we didn't capture every single station, but you can see they went into the robotics and Megatronics. I think this is like not my Mike's like, yeah, thank you, Mike. Room where they got to see the classroom, see students in action. I followed 2 groups, the grapes and the sizzling or dazzling watermelons. They had like fruit group names. They were led by OHS students, and there were students there showcasing what they're doing in the electives classes or the CTE classes. You can see here a student, he actually took over the teacher's presentation about speech and communication. He just hopped right on the stage she has in the front of her class and gave her presentation. We went to the marketing class, and students were working on various projects. Into the auto shop. The girls didn't really like that. They were all sitting off in the corner, and I said, "What's going on?" And they're like, "It smells really bad in there. This is not for us." But I'm like, "That's good. You know that." And we went into the theater where they had, they were actually practicing for the Mary Poppins play, so they got to see them. And the teachers talked to them about, it's not just about acting, but actually you can be in the Stagecrafters and build the stage, be in the technical part, the backstage. The art teacher had pottery wheels set up in the cafeteria, so students got to showcase that. So there were, again, 10 different stations for the students to learn all about the various offerings at OHS. And honestly, the kids were so excited, so engaged, and I came back to Tanya, I'm like, my heart is like literally bursting. This is why we do what we do. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so proud to work in a place that has all of these offerings for kids. It goes to that video when we were doing the strategic planning. Because I don't want to forget anything, I think it's important to really give credit to Lisa Butts. She's our CFE director, and Leslie Fletmeyer, who is our career navigator at the high school. They really played an integral role in putting this entire event together. And yeah, it was amazing. It showcased exactly what the kids were saying we want for our future here.
That's great. Thank you, Anita. And
You're welcome.
It was, how long ago, when was the last time we did something like this? It was quite a long time ago.
And it has not been done, Lisa said, in her 14 years here. So like our minds are spinning now of like, how do we make sure we do this? But also Mr. Bigelow and I talked today about a potential open house for families. So it's not just the kids that get to see it, but can families come in and have a similar experience? So maybe that's coming, not maybe in the immediate future, but near future. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Right. So that just kind of brought the whole why to life. It was just really incredible to have that opportunity. So, So after the community forum group had a chance to see the video, we had lots of great dialogue. We had groups of individuals. We mixed and matched, so we had different perspectives, whether it be a parent, whether it be a teacher, an administrator, central office. We had quite a few community members. Lieutenant Patterson was there, Chief Majestic was there, and all contributing to the dialogue. And essentially, their first question was, what are your top 3 hopes and aspirations for Oxford Community Schools? And just the dialogue alone was really energizing, just to hear all their thoughts and ideas. And here are some examples of things that came out of this. They really hoped for student voice and student choice. They wanted multiple pathways, which is what Anita just presented, right? The various opportunities that kids have. Mentorship, you heard one of our students talk about mentorship as well. And a safe, inclusive school environment with a sense of belonging. We heard Jeff talk about that sense of belonging and how critical it is about students wanting to come to school if they feel they belong. So that was great. I mean, it just got so loud in there when they were having dialogue. So that was really energizing. And then after that, they had a chance to do a gallery walk and have additional conversation around draft vision, mission, and core values. They had conversation. They placed group thoughts as well as individual thoughts on each of the draft proposed vision, mission, and core values. And then what we did, the dialogue was around what do you like, what resonates with you, what do you dislike, and what is missing, what's still missing in this statement. So lots of great conversation. The feedback that we received, some really great feedback, actively listening and engaged. Different modes of sharing ideas, different groups moving around, coming back together, reconnecting. We had opportunity for all voices to be heard, and one of the things that is really important to me since I got here, everybody's voice is important. Everybody's voice has value, and it's critical that we hear all voices, right? And so I appreciated the fact that everyone who was there leaned into our norm of lifting everyone's voice up and valuing everyone's voice. So I appreciated that comment. Variety of perspectives. This is a long one, but essentially, having an opportunity to come together to engage in reviewing the hard work, because it was hard work. We had cabinet and we had our administrative team. We did iteration after iteration after iteration and came back even for some more input, right? Because this is really important that we get this right. This isn't something you can just toss out there, because this is going to be our driver. This is what we're going towards. And so we want to make sure that it is a clear and well-vetted vision. So I appreciated this comment, that they appreciated all the hard work that had been done ahead of time. Both being heard and hearing what everyone else had to say. And finally, the cookies. Yes, we had to make sure people were well fed. And they, Patty and her team make great cookies. I do need to say that. Some things that we're looking to enhance. They liked the format. However, we wanted to bring additional community members into the conversation. And so we asked everybody to bring a friend. So when we have this again in April, bring somebody, right? Whether it be a significant other, whether it be a peer, a coworker, bring them to the forum, and so that we can increase the voices that are being heard. Facilitators, they want a little more facilitation to help the flow of conversation in their smaller groups. So we're thinking about how we could structure that. And then a little more time to debrief some of the statements. And so we're thinking about how we might structure that a little bit differently. And making sure that staff has additional opportunity for input just beyond a survey. So we'll have to think about what that might look like. It might look like presentations during staff meetings, getting additional information during staff meetings. So we'll have to think through that. And then I think we're on a good path and looking forward to seeing the plan to back up what will be decided on. So we'll continue to present it to the community. It is a continuous growth opportunity and development. It's a work in progress. So it was a wonderful, wonderful event. And then we did send a survey yesterday. There were about 35 people who had signed up to give input in a survey. We tried to mirror as much as possible the experience that people had during the actual forum itself. So that was a little tricky, but I think we got kind of close. And then give them an opportunity to give input. So we sent it out to those individuals, but we also sent it out to individuals who may not have been able to attend because of the inclement weather. And so we just wanted to give them an opportunity as well. So I encourage you, if you receive that in your email, please send us your thoughts. It'll take about 15, 20 minutes, but it'll be 15 and 20 minutes well worth it, I promise. Our next steps in this process, we got to roll our sleeves up, lots of work. So we are going to be starting next week, our cabinet, once we get all the feedback from the survey, we need that back by Monday, because starting next Tuesday, our cabinet, we're going to roll up our sleeves, dig into the feedback, and start making those adjustments and get to a final version of that vision, mission, and core values, so that then we can start moving on to the goals. So the cabinet will be working with that feedback on February 4th. We'll again finalize that on the 11th, as well as start working with our goals and aligned actions. Flip that. We'll work with Ad Team on the 11th to give them a chance to see our final versions, and then on the 19th we'll get into our goals and aligned actions. So we go back and forth between cabinet, ad team, cabinet, ad team. Again, as many eyes as we can get on it and get it to a point where when we have our next session, which is April 9th, that we will have some aspect of it worked out, a draft that people can sink their teeth into and give feedback again. Our ultimate goal is that we have the plan finalized by June, and that it's presented to the board in June. So again, now notice I used a spring theme this time. I think I did myself in. I had a winter snow theme for this one. So I think that maybe I manifested that. So it's, flowers, and it's going to be beautiful. So Wednesday, April 9th, similar time frame, 1 to 3 and 6 to 8. We'll start sending out the invitations, the sign-ups in March. We'll have a large window of time for people to sign up. I will need RSVP by a certain date, probably by the end of March, because I will have to make sure the location is appropriate for the numbers. So we'll make sure that we get that out and communicate that. So thank you to everybody who participated. Thank you to my cabinet. Thank you to my ad team who helped facilitate the dialogue and facilitate the gallery walk. It was excellent, so thank you. All right. This past week, we had some new executive orders that kind of tripped us up a little bit that we're still trying to figure out. Reinstatement of immigration enforcement in sensitive locations. This includes our schools, where historically that has not taken place. Now that has been, that safety net has been removed. So we've been working very hard to better understand how we support our students in a situation like this and support our community. So here are some things that we're looking into this week, and I'm hoping to have something sent out very soon. Working with the policy committee, we're making sure that our policies and procedures around FERPA, which are privacy information around student information, that those are in place, and we do have solid policies around those, and making sure that we are in compliance with that. That's something we're pretty good at. We don't tend to give out student information outside of those parameters, so I'm confident along those lines. And then working with school leadership and safety teams to make sure that we have a plan in place, that they understand if ICE does come to the school, what are we doing, right? Having a clear plan laid out to make sure that they know that they are supported. Collaborate with local law enforcement to understand their requirements. I've had conversations with Lieutenant Patterson as well as Chief Sowald regarding what are their roles if this were to happen, if an ICE agent did come to a school or did want to serve papers at a school. And so we had a great conversation around their responsibilities. And then this has to do with FERPA, making sure our directory information in our schools for students is aligned with FERPA and that we're not outside of those parameters, and making sure that families know they can opt out of having any student information in a school directory. So we'll be working with that as well. Language access for interpretation and translation during school and after hours, so we'll be working with my team with that. And then finally, gain awareness of Plyer versus Doe. This is the case that essentially sets the stage for schools to educate all students regardless of their immigration status. We do not ask, are you legal? Are you a citizen? No, we educate everyone in public education. And that is the case that sets that up. And finally, collaborating with our legal team. We've already been in contact with our legal team regarding what is required if papers are served, what are the process. And so again, I'll have a clearly delineated course of action for this aspect. I know this really caught some people off guard. I know it caught me off guard a little bit, but we've had a lot of dialogue throughout Oakland County. I've worked collaboratively with many superintendents, so I appreciate their input, getting to see what they're doing and how they're supporting their students and their families. So I am very appreciative of that. Some safety updates that we have. There are several bills that have been passed in December of 2024. The first one is House Bill 4095, and this is for public and non-public schools. We must adopt and implement a standardized response terminology plan. Good news, we're already in compliance with that, right? We're ahead of the curve. We've already adopted a standard response protocol and standard reunification method as a part of the emergency operations plan. Another law enacted is 4096. Department of State Police shall establish a standardized response terminology plan and provide it to public and non-public schools. As a part of our template, our EOP template, we will be bringing that to the board to review in closed session in the not too distant future. The Michigan State Police Office of School Safety already adopted a standard response protocol and standard reunification method, and because of that, our practices are aligned and we are in compliance. A few other ones is our House Bill 5549 requires schools to establish threat assessment teams. Again, we are 100% in compliance of this because of our BTAM teams across the district that are trained in the NTAC model of threat assessment. So the work that we've done over the past several years is already ahead of the curve when it comes to the law. The law is kind of, behind what we're enacting. So we are in great shape as far as that is concerned. House Bill 5659 and 5660, no action are needed on our part. They have to do with a school safety commission, and that's a state level aspect. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on that. I know when we get new laws enacted, oftentimes districts have to scramble to get aligned with them. We don't have to do that. We're in great shape. Safety updates. I talked previously about updating a response to guidepost recommendations. I'm still working on that, so we have updated it on the website, but I'm still making adjustments based on feedback, so I appreciate the feedback that I've been getting. The QR code will take you to that guidepost update as well as the tiny URL. Some of the key updates that have been reflected in this latest iteration have to do with our mass notification system, which was updated to align with the standard response protocol, which is aligned with the law. So that's pretty great. We have threat assessment and suicide risk assessment process. We also have trained multidisciplinary teams. Research, we use the NTAC, which is a research-based model. Our EOP, which again is going to come to the board in a closed session to review next month. We did transition to Fortis away from another agency, so that is a great partnership with our Fortis personnel. Installation of night lock sensors in restrooms and locker rooms, so there's an opportunity to lock those spaces when before we didn't have that. And it also has a sensor, so if you do lock that, because we do want to make sure appropriate things are happening in those spaces, that there is a sensor that goes off so people know, hey, that space has been locked, we need to make sure everything's okay in that area. And development and implementation of the building vulnerability assessments. So all of those areas have been updated. It's not a perfect document. There's 40 some odd recommendations that we try to keep on top of. There are some areas that are just not feasible, so I will update those areas, but for the most part, it's been updated and is accurate where we are currently. Another thing, all the kids are like, yay, snow days. And I do love these pictures because look how happy those boys are on the right and the girls on the sled. They're just so happy. Your superintendent, not so happy. You know, as much as I love a good snow day for students, unfortunately, we've gotten to the place where we, especially at our high school, we have maxed out our snow days. So any more snow days at the high school, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to, I know, right? We're going to have to figure out how we make those up. So that's why I got a little cringy last week when we had to call those days. That was not something I preferred to do, but as I tell people, the number one thing is safety. I think someone sent me a picture of a bus that had turned over somewhere and not too far away, and that is your superintendent's greatest fear, as well as Mr. Fitzgerald. This is not something we ever want to have happen in our school district, so we want to make sure we are being cautious about getting kids to school safely. So we will start thinking about and planning how we have to make up those days if we get another snow day. But who knows, maybe spring is right around the corner and we won't have to worry about it. Yeah. Due to the snow days, Oxford Got Talent was moved to March 11th, so it's still happening. We still get to see our kids' fabulous talent. It's just going to happen a little later, so I wanted to make sure I updated that. I'm going to share some really cool things. The schools put out newsletters, and I get a chance to review them. And there's so many cool things happening in our schools. I clearly cannot show them all, so I just kind of pulled out some individual things. So this is at Clear Lake. The Clear Lake Student Council, I just thought this was such a clever title, Super Bowl, and they're doing a can drive. A soup can drive to donate for families in need. I just thought that was so clever. Those kids, they're so clever. As Jeff talked about at OES, the awesome art happenings. So kids just being crafty and having fun and being creative. OMS, this might have a little bit of an ooh factor here. Not an ooh as an ooh-ah like ew. They had a visit from Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and the students were studying ecosystems and the impact of invasive species and they got to hold a live sea lamprey. If you know what that looks like, they are super ooey, and they have like this big round mouth full of teeth that just bite into fish and hang on there. So they're a little slimy, but look how excited the kids are to, manhandle them. So they got to do that. So that's pretty cool. That was a great activity. At Leonard Elementary, we had the green team. They wrote a grant for a sensory garden, which is super cool, and they won the grant. And so Detroit Zoo presented a check to Mrs. Bensman and the Leonard Green team. So congratulations to them. That's amazing, a sensory garden. I love the concept. And finally, at the high school, we have our girls bowling, who are county champions. Whoop, whoop. Well done. And Chase Beal, a wrestler for our high school, is on his 100th win. Very impressive. So those are our highlights for the last 2 weeks. Just a few things going on, never a dull moment here in Oxford, but showcasing so many awesome things in our district. It is just such a joy to be out in our schools, and just the energy and the activities and the creativity is just phenomenal. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here. All right, that's it for me.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Milligan? Mike?
I do have one. The 8th grade to the high school career, have we thought about opening that to the 8th graders of OVA and giving them maybe more exposure to that in person? Because some of them, for us personally, we just we do what works best for our kids, right? And so I think some of that exposure, certainly seeing, the auto shop and the robotics lab and whatnot. I know we can, from a club standpoint, we can be involved in all of it, right? But from auto shop, have we thought about inviting those kids? I don't know what the take rate would be, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, I think it definitely would, and especially if we end up having an open house that Anita spoke about, sending it to the families that they could bring their kids up to see what is offered. So as Anita mentioned, this isn't something we've done for some time now. So the feedback is really helpful and something to think about. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I just want to say thank you again for the strategic planning session. I think for all of us who attended from the board, we really found a lot of value in it and appreciate all the hard work you and your team have put into that.
Thank you.
So wanted to say thank you to that. Loved the 8th graders going into the high school. I heard from multiple parents the CTE classes were huge hits, and they were so cool and excited to be at. So great job with that. And then I just had the one question regarding the guidepost update. I know you had discussed about potentially, I don't want to get into all of that tonight as it's a living document, but having potentially a forum for that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So it has been recommended that we have a community safety forum, and just to have dialogue, right? So no super strict structure or anything, just, having people have an opportunity to talk through things that they appreciate about our safety protocols, things that, they'd like to see changed, concerns that we still have. And so one of the suggestions was at one of the upcoming board meetings, having some time ahead of the board meeting where families could come, especially if we have a presentation at that school, right? So I don't know who is on the next, I know OVA is presenting next, and then we have another school presenting, so I'll have to see who's presenting. But I'd like to have it at that school, so we might change the location. So instead of being here at Lakeville, it could be at the school who's presenting. And then we could have the safety forum ahead of that board meeting to give families a chance to see the school, have the conversation, talk through some safety pieces, and then they could stay for the board meeting. That'd be amazing. But thank you for bringing that up. Definitely look for some communication regarding that opportunity. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you also presenting on the field trip?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep, we have one field trip request. It is our leadership team at the high school. The advisor is Emma Schreiber. They are looking to go to Grand Rapids for a conference, for a leadership conference from February 22nd through the 25th. And the details of the trip, the opportunities for students is to network with other student leaders around the state, engage in team builders, connection activities, breakout rooms, and hear from keynote speakers. And the advisor says that it's an extension of the classroom and inspires students to be leaders at their own school and organization. So it's a wonderful opportunity for our students. So I'm just presenting it tonight and to have an opportunity to vote on it at the next meeting.
Thank you. Did anyone have questions regarding that field trip? Okay, we will vote on the next meeting for that. Moving along to board matters, we have our board leadership code. We, as you remember last time, looked that over. We're now at the point where we can move to adopt it if everybody is comfortable. So can I get a motion? James?
Yeah, move to adopt the 2025 Board Leadership Code as presented.
Support. Mike Whitney, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I just need to get signatures from everybody before we disperse tonight on the form. Thanks.
Thank you, James. All right. Up next, our finance and operations. Mr. Fitzgerald.
John, would you like this? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to set up that later, too. So I want to apologize up front if I have my back to anybody. I'm trying to flip some note pages as I go as well. Clicker's going to help with that. There we go. So, first of all, we're looking at some baseline public school finance issues from a 30,000-foot view. So I'm counting on Dr. Milligan to pull me out of the weeds if I drift off into something, so as we keep moving along. With that said, this can't take more than 2, maybe 3 hours tops to get through this whole slow show. Not really. That was finance humor. I mean, look at the shock on that. But, all right, so these would be the items we want to touch on as we go through the presentation. So we'll be looking at primary funding sources for public schools in general. What makes that up? What's in the big pieces of it, such as the school aid fund and the foundation allowance model, which came on board in the mid-90s, and it's the basics of how that works, and where local property taxes and the state school aid all come together in that piece. Also from a revenue and expenditure budget, basics of the budget, and really when I'm talking to this, I really have the general fund in mind. We use multiple fund structures. The single largest is our general fund, by and far the largest, and that's the one that's really in mind when we're talking through these slides. So with that in mind, we'll end up in the end looking at an overview of some millage stuff, school bonds, sinking funds, all that kind of stuff, how that interplays in the school operating world, and then a quick 30,000-foot view at some of the programming that this district runs that is above and beyond our base programming that goes on in the quote-unquote seated environment. And with that, we will get started with what are the primary revenues that actually fund a school district. So the first and foremost is, I'm sure everybody's heard the expression, the per pupil foundation allowance. So that's a model that in the next slide or so we'll get a little deeper into, but that's the single biggest funding source in our district. Our general fund's roughly $100 million, a little bit higher. Maybe 75 million of it is produced through this calculation. The balance of the funding comes from federal, state, and local grants. And when I say state, there's state aid funding that feeds the foundation allowance, and then there's state aid funding that we call categoricals. That's another form of a state grant. So that's a little different than the actual state aid piece. Intermediate source funding, and that's funding that really comes through the intermediate district structure in the state. In our case, it's through Oakland Schools, and P18 funding is the name, the common name for special ed funding that's distributed to all the local districts within Oakland Schools boundaries. Oakland Schools itself levies that tax and then distributes the funding to the local districts based on an established formula. And then the infamous other sources of funding, those are really things like investment revenue, rental fees, transfers in is another kind of it's a name used, driven by the Michigan Public School Accounting Manual. That's really money moved from one fund to another that's related to indirect costs and things like that. So that's on the edge of getting in the weeds, and that's all I'll touch on that piece. By the way, if you have any questions, please ask as we go. So this, with respect to the foundation allowance funding piece, there's really two big pieces that fund that. State aid piece, and then the local property tax that the districts levy. That's the 18 mills that get levied on the quote-unquote non-homestead properties. That's predominantly businesses within the district. So these are the different funding sources that actually fund the state's school aid fund that turns around, funds the local district's foundation allowances. So this is from fiscal year 23, so it's a little dated. On this breakout of the major pieces of the funding, sales and use tax has always been number one. Federal revenue, because it's fiscal year 23, is number two because there's still a lot of COVID-related funding running through the state. Pre-2019, it would probably be in the fourth position. The other big piece is state income tax, the set property tax, and you see the word set, that's short for, and that's actually the language that shows up on most people's property tax bills. It's the school education tax. And I want to be clear on this piece. This goes directly to the state. It does not come to the local public schools. Only the 18 mills tied to local business and non-homestead property comes directly to us. And then there's funding that the school aid fund gets related to the state lottery funds. And that's really the net profits of the whole state lottery program. They fund about 6.2% of the whole school aid bucket, so to speak. All others about 8.5%, and those are those really tiny little slices that the one would go up there, 8.5 up there, miscellaneous, that you can, if you got a desire to look, I can show you where to find the other 50 million little tiny things that kind of trickle into the big pot, and one is the state aid fund. So, I've used the phrase foundation allowance a couple of times now. I like this kind of picture. It's got a bucket in it though, and I think in a previous board meeting I'd used a water bottle as the example of what the foundation allowance represented. So I thought I'd shake things up, it's finance, this means shake up for us. We'd use a bucket, right? So if that bucket represents the foundation allowance for the year we're in, fiscal year 25, and that's $9,608 per 1.0 student FTE. The FTE is an acronym for full-time equivalent. Student FTE does not equal student headcount. Student headcount is usually a bigger, higher number. The equivalency piece is a way of calculating students as if all students, 1.0 FTE for a student is equal to one student in school for a 6-hour day set of programming. So that said, we may have a mix of some homeschool kids that come for some non-core classes here, and they're doing homeschool programming. So they're counted as a fraction of an FTE, but the numbers you see and what we get paid on, they do this math with it, and that's going on in our enrollment area. Barb does a great job with it. It's a master's degree in itself to understand the way it's all put together. But so once you figure out the pieces that feed that bucket, our 18 mills that are levied on our business properties predominantly in the district, it generates, the year we're in now, about $852 per student. So the point here is that the balance, the $87.56, is coming from the state aid fund. And this is always a point out that when, in the old days, you used to refer to when the state gets an economic downturn, the school aid fund catches pneumonia. Because if you remember, the first thing that fills it most is sales tax, and that's usually the first thing that takes a nosedive shortly followed by the income tax. We haven't experienced that in quite a bit, and I probably shouldn't bring it up. Hopefully that's been stabilized from a going forward point of view. So this is actually how the funding model works. Literally, the foundation allowance amount, the 9608, times the student count, the FTE count, and currently it's 7428 for our district. So every district now has the same foundation allowance amount, 9608. 10 years ago, that was different. Every district had a different amount, and over the years, the state's been trying to harmonize them. So now everybody's on the same number on that side of the equation, but you know, every district has a different student count. So the quick math there for us is roughly about 75 million. So it creates this liability the state's guaranteeing that we're going to get for the starting piece of funding, and that's funded by joint funding through local property taxes and then the school aid fund. One of the things I always want to point out is this, to do the math on the student count within this calculation. For the year we're in is fiscal 25 for public schools, so it's 24, 25. We start in July of calendar 24 and we end in June of calendar 25. So that's referred to as fiscal 25. The state's year ends in September, so there's a 3-year differential, which, just as a side note, always causes havoc from a cash flow funding point of view, because our last 2/11ths of our state aid payments show up in July and August after our fiscal year is done. Question?
I think you meant 3 month, and
Excuse
not
me.
3 year.
3 month, I'm sorry, 3 month. Thank you very much. That would be a problem. So for the year we're in, the student count that was done in February of 24, you know, last fiscal year, is used. We take 10% of that number, we add it to 90% of the student count that goes on in October of the current fiscal year. So that becomes the 7428 that we get paid on. Some districts that helps, some that hurts. It depends if you are growing, stable, or declining in student count. So just as a quick composition, when I say student FTE, I'm talking about all the resident kids, all the school of choice kids, all our shared time service kids, and our virtual program students. So that's that whole big picture of what feeds that whole big piece that state aid comes in on. So from, let me get caught up here real quick. So in terms of the public school budget structure itself, it's really driven by two main sources: state law, and the biggest of those laws are the Uniform Budgeting Accounting Act, the Public Act of 1968, and then the General Property Tax Act, Public Act of 1893. Now, 1893 has been amended a number of times over the years, so it's really not that old. But and then the other state law that's tied to the budget world that we as a school district and want to always keep an eye on is a set of laws known as the early warning laws. This was a set of laws that was put in place, I want to say 10, 12 years ago now. They're really designed to help the Michigan Department of Treasury spot a school district before they get into serious financial trouble, as opposed to waiting for them to be in what's known as negative fund balance position, and that's a bad spot to be in. So those are the things that, from the law point of view, we look at most. There's several other laws that have little pieces that feed in or are specific to specific items, but these are the big three that everybody keeps on their top radar. And then the other big driver that tells us how to do our accounting and not just accounting for the cost, but how to structure our budgets, it's the Michigan Public School Accounting Manual. That can be found on the state school aid website, MDE school aid website. It's probably like the 7th bullet down. It's actually the appendix that we look at most, because that breaks out the actual account string structure and which piece of that string. So picture, I want to say there's 12 elements, and I'm going to get this wrong. So there's 4 digits, then 3 digits, then 3 digits, then 4 digits, and 4. So each subset, all strung together, create the account string. And you're telling me to get off. Oh, there you go. You just got to wave your hand at me and say, move on. So anyway, that's our Bible, the Michigan School Accounting Manual. So the other thing that defines how we do things are the General Accounting Standards Board. That's a GASB versus FASB. If you're working in the private sector and you're in the finance side, you operate under FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board. GASB we live in. The biggest difference between our world and private sector world, I mean, everybody's familiar with cash accounting. It's literally, it's cash in your pocket, cash out of your pocket. You're pretty much done in terms of accuracy of how much cash you got. Then there's the accrual accounting, which is in the private sector that falls under FASB. School districts live in the world in between the affectionately referred to as modified accrual accounting. Some things they do the cash, some things they do the full accrual, and it becomes an entirely hair-pulling out event if you're not familiar with the process. But once you get it down under your understanding, it just, becomes second nature as to how to do this stuff. And I kind of point those stuff out because for me, it's always amazing to me that when I wasn't working in public schools a long time ago, I would look at it and wonder why do the schools do that way? And as soon as I started working in public schools, it's like, oh, it's all these laws and this and that that make us do different approaches to things that may not seem logical, but because we're, the duty of law there, we're doing it that way, kind of thing. So from an operating surplus, a few definitions. So you'll hear the phrase operating surplus or operating deficit. So that's in any given year. For instance, the budget amendment that's coming before the board next meeting, that has a budgeted operating surplus. I can't remember the specific number. It's roughly $150,000. That means we're recognizing $150,000 of revenue over expenses. If it had an operating deficit of $150,000, then the revenue would be $150,000 short of covering all our current budgeted expenses. That in of itself is not a big warning thing to see if there's an operating deficit. Sometimes boards will say, hey, we want to take this chunk of fund balance and spend it on that project. And that, outside of normal operating, in order to spend it, you'll end up in an operating deficit for that year. The thing you got to worry about with operating surpluses and deficits are, if it's a deficit driven by a single decision of the board or some other event, it's not something to have the alarm bells go off. But if it's an operating deficit because of the cost of your actual everyday operations are exceeding your everyday revenues in, that's when you got to take action. And that's the purpose of forecasting and all those kinds of things, to see ahead of time when things are starting to go off tracks, or if there's a particular element that's out of the norm, and it gives you time to go figure out what's going on and how to react. So the difference there too, the highlight there, difference there too, is fund equity, because you can have a positive fund balance, and we call that fund equity, and you can have a negative fund balance. That's when the early warning laws and everything that the Department of Treasury will do, they will be your best friends if we ever got near that. So that's typically a 5% trigger point in terms of your fund balance if you get down to 5%. So it's, that 5% is different for every district. That gets you on their list real quick, kind of thing. And then the phrase you'll hear, the adopted budget versus amended budgets. So, and this is another thing that is a problem because the state's fiscal year is different than the school fiscal year. Under the law, under the Uniform Budgeting Act, boards for public schools have to approve a budget for the upcoming year, and that's called the adopted budget, by June 30 of the current year. So in this June, you'll be adopting the budget that starts the following July. The challenge there is it's about a 50-50 shot if the state has actually approved the state's school aid fund budget. So my point here that I can't emphasize enough is that a lot of times adopted budgets coming in are built on educated assumptions, experience of years in business, or just an outright guess, because you just don't know what the state's going to end up doing. For example, the year we're in now, coming right into June, all the talk coming out of the House, the Senate, and the governor's office was probably something in the neighborhood of a $200 to $300 foundation increase and some other things. So everybody, conservative people went 2, historical people would do a big regression analysis coming in at 275 or something. Well, the budget that actually got approved had a 0 increase. At the last minute, they decided to change all that increase in funding and put it in a specific categorical, a state categorical, AKA a state grant. And everybody's budget from a presentation point of view was just wrong. So in the amendment process, and you'll see some of that in terms of what's highlighted and what we identify the big changes when we come through the budget amendment process, and you'll see that in the documents going into the February 11 meeting. So that's when you get the first amendment piece that most districts will do mid-year to catch those things and clean those things up and get things to reflect what actually happened. So those are the real distinctions of what goes on, why an adopted budget, why the amendment budget changes, the amounts they do, the mid-year, and then the final come June, you'll also be, you'll not only be adopting or approving the adopted budget for the coming year, you'll be approving the final amendment for the year we're in. That's another law that basically says, and this is what, I guess from the private sector, our colleagues from the private sector, I don't know if they're mad or jealous or just don't get it, because the actual law says we have to amend our budgets to reflect what our actual expenditures were. And that even itself is it may sound like, well, why aren't the budgets exactly on to what the expenses are? That's another case too, that when you're doing your final amendment, there's still 3 months, 3 months of costs lagging that really don't show up until July or August when you've got to close everything. So there's a bit of professional, educated guessing and projecting and all that kind of stuff built into that piece too. Where in the private sector, you'll be adjusting, and most organizations will have a standing budget that adjusts on a monthly or quarterly basis relative to reality, so they can adjust their production or whatever they're involved with. We have these static timelines and static dates.
John, before you move on, I have a couple questions on this one. What is our current fund balance percent?
Our fund balance percentage is 16%.
16?
16.8. That's a little over 17.
Exact. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. And then you had mentioned the operating surplus that you expect to bring in February, and I just had a question. Did you build in that the board would be approving these two projects in that and still maintaining an operating surplus?
Yeah.
Okay.
The kitchen project is actually funded from, the vast majority of it funded from the food service fund. A little piece may or may not end up out of the capital project fund, which is in our district, because we don't have a sinking fund anymore. Our general fund funds that capital project. So indirectly, the state, that's already accounted for, and they'll be coming in with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So from a budget structure, the types of funds we use, again defined by the Michigan School Accounting Code. There's a general fund, and that's really the big one that everybody uses. And that the general fund's uniqueness is that you can do any activity that goes on in the school district and account for it and budget for it in the general fund, but it doesn't work the other way. For example, the community service fund, where we track costs and budget for our early childhood program, a district, if it chose to, can have all those costs be part of the general fund. Even the food service can be recognized in some of these funds and that kind of things. But the reason you put them in the standalone funds is A, they're a different kind of business, they're a special revenue fund. And B, from a business management point of view, you want your structure set aside so you can actually see how that organization's doing, how is their early childhood program doing, same with food service, that kind of thing. So we'll use general fund. The special revenue funds up there are the ones that we do use, the food service, community service. School activity funds are really related to the different money that's collected and spent at the school level for, they used to be called trust and agency funds. They were, of course, Gatsby changed the rules because they gotta change the rules to keep themselves in business kind of thing. And so they all had to convert into a representation and be presented as school activity funds. And then there's capital project funds and debt funds. So capital project funds are pretty self-explanatory. That's where you track your big project costs and keep them segregated so you can track. If you issue a bond, you have to have a separate capital project fund tied to it. Most districts have a standalone capital project fund just to track smaller projects, or like in our case, we'll fund out of general fund and track them in there. And then the debt funds themselves are just where we account for how we're paying back our debt on our outstanding bond debt. So the biggest expenses in there are going to be principal repayment and interest payments. So, and those are done, those are paid out twice a year, tied to our existing debt structure. So then from a revenue budget point of view, and every fund has really two budgets. We all think of it as one budget. There's really two. There's a revenue budget and there's an expenditure budget. So the revenue budgets, the sources of revenue are accounted for and described as the following here: local source revenues, state source revenues, intermediate source, federal sources, and the all collective other sources. And so local source, a typical local source would be the local the local property tax, investment revenue, things like that that are locally generated fees, that kind of stuff. Anything coming from the state aid piece of the foundation allowance, any categorical grants, those things, they show up and are accounted for under state source revenues as incoming funds. The intermediate sources, again, is that Oakland schools transfer over to the local districts of the special ed funding. And our single biggest piece there is the P-18 special education pass-through funding. There are a couple of smaller ones associated with some other programming that goes on that the ISD itself may be sponsoring some ISD level grants, and it'll come through that. It'll be categorized as that. Federal source grants, IDEA, Title are the big ones, big names. All the COVID stuff from the last 4 or 5 years fell in this category. And then the other source stuff is really just that. They're inter-district, they're called operating transfers. There's not a lot in there. You'll see in our case when we're funding a capital project fund with general fund money, the transfer of the money shows up as the expenditure version of this other source, and then shows up as this revenue source in the capital project fund. So there's a one-to-one relationship there. So that's the revenue side of things. This is the expenditure side of the budget house. On the left side of the screen, it's function code structure, and this is the presentation that under the Uniform Budgeting Act, you'll see the budget documents that'll show, here's your revenues, then you'll see the different line items for, instructional, basic instruction costs, all of these things here. And this actually, that's listed here, mimics our financial statements, how we present them in the financial statements. So from a function code point of view, that's really saying this is the kind of activity. So under instruction basic programs and added needs, you'll see things like the elementary, the middle school, the high school. Those are function 111, 112, 113. Those are all instructional cost related programs, so they show up under this categorization, as opposed to the transportation to get the kids to the schools and back. That shows up in its own standalone line called transportation services. Operation and maintenance is just that, it's our facilities group. So they make a distinction in the way they want it reported by activity. And on the other side, the object code, they part of that big long account string is the object code, and that has us make the distinction, the type of cost, whether it's a wage, a fringe benefit, a purchase service, supplies and materials, capital outlay, dues, fees, and of course the other. There's always another. So this is depending upon how you want to use and present internally. You'll see some of the funds that may be presented from a budget amendment point of view using the object code approach, like food service and typically community service, the early childhood stuff. The cost may be presented on the object code approach. The reason that it's not following the function approach is the Uniform Budgeting Act makes us do the functional approach. The object code side it's not directed by that. There's no specific thing that says you've got to present the budget under this format for those other funds. And historically, it's always been easier to understand on the object display. And as we do the presentations, and when Courtney's doing the presentation at the next board meeting, we'll point out that, the difference between them. Just seeing if you're paying attention. So this is really the big pieces on how you'll see costs and budgets come through. So from our internal budget cycle and planning timeline, so these would be some key dates in the cycle. We do publish what I refer to as a budget calendar that includes more than just budget dates, but a lot of the key things that affecting the budget. And these are some of the key dates off that schedule. So in January, there's a consensus revenue estimating conference done at the state. All the stakeholders from the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office, and usually from Treasury Department, sit down and take a look at how much money they actually are collecting in the school aid fund. And that's their first look at, okay, we thought we were going to have X, and we're at Y, so you hopefully if Y is bigger than X, that's good. If it's less than X, it's not good. So this last one they just did in January, Y was bigger than X, so far so good. So then in February, the governor issues their State of the Budget address, wrapped up in a bigger sometimes State of the Union, sometimes State of the Budget standalone. And whoever the governor is, in this case, Governor Whitmer will present her budget priorities. And in there, we usually glean out, well, what does that mean for the foundation allowance? What does that mean to us in the school world? Because it's the whole state budget. So we just peel out what's hitting the school world. Followed by that, and then in terms of February ourselves, that's what we're going to try to get as a practice here to do our forecasting in February. Prior years, I think it was a little later in the year. So we're proposing to go in February, at the end of the February, I want to say it's 25th meeting. So knowing, by that time, we know what's going on from the January consensus revenue meeting. By the way, they refer to that as the CREC meeting, if you hear that expression. It's not crack, it's CREC. And there's one also in May, but that's another acronym that they'll use. So if you ever hear that, and you're like, okay, it's, you know. So anyway, between February and April, there's usually a House and Senate. They all publish their own budget. So now there's 3 competing budgets out there, how everybody wants to spend it. So usually in May, they'll all stop, take a look again, and do another consensus revenue estimating conference. And did the money show up? Yes, that's always good. And then they'll sit down with representatives from those stakeholder groups and craft what's called the conference report. And that's really just the negotiated budget of the 3 pieces. They get that settled, they send it up to the governor, and hopefully the governor signs it. All the governors always commit to signing them by sometime mid-June, so when our boards are all approving these things, they're approving it knowing what they're actually getting. So they have a less than 50% delivery on that, so, and I suspect it'll be a little same way this year. I can see the look on your face. So they usually will come in with a budget that's based on what's been talked about. 50% of the time, it's not actually been passed by the state yet, but it's in the process. Usually ends up in July kind of thing. And so that goes on, and then again in June, you'll see our final budget amendment for the year and then adopted budget coming before the board for the coming year. So moving away from the budget piece, one of the things that actually impacts budgets a lot are different millages that occur. This is just a 30,000-foot view of what you'll see in our public school world. The state education tax, of course, again, that's a direct state millage, so that shows up on everybody's taxes. I point that out again because most people take it with us. I just want to say it again, it goes to the state, it's not ours, it's not us. The general operating millage is that 18 mills on the homestead. We do levy. We are only legally allowed to levy up to 18 mills. Other districts, because of an amendment called the Headley Amendment that came online when Proposal A came online in the mid-90s, its goal works almost like it was supposed to. In the end, each year there's an analysis done, and it calculates a factor called the millage reduction factor. And if it calculates out less than 1.0, then whatever your millage was coming into that year, you've got to reduce it by that amount. So if it came in at 98.5, and you were levying 18 mills last year, whatever 98.5% of 18 is, 17, whatever, that's all you can legally levy for the year in, the year you're in. So over the years, public schools have devised a defense mechanism, if you will, to get voters to approve, to authorize a millage number bigger than 18, say 20. So and they last for roughly 10 years in most cases, these authorizations for these millages. So as this Headley Amendment goes on year after year, if it starts knocking down that 20, it hits the 20, not the 18. So you've got the whole 2.0 amount to be reduced before it even breaches your 18. So the key thing about levying 18 mills at a minimum, the state assumes all the public schools are levying 18 mills when they fill that foundation allowance bucket. So we are actually a district that's in the condition we're less than 18 because of the Headley Amendment. So just from a radar screen kind of thing as a school district, we need to be looking at a millage approval for the general operating millage that goes on the business world to make sure we get something back up to the 18 level. In my ideal world, I would love the community to support authorizing something above 18, knowing we can only legally levy 18. So it's that defense piece, how to deal with the quote-unquote flaw has been referred to as the flaw in the Headley Amendment Proposal A changes of the 90s. And for whatever reason, nobody wants to go back in and open that box back up. Otherwise, they should have fixed that long ago. So that's one of the things that'll be coming. You'll see the sinking fund millage is a millage that's voter approved. It's similar to a bond millage in terms of the approval process. You have to go out to your community, give them the case why you want, either a sinking fund or a bond or whatever the case may be, and then convince them to support it. They go out and do a vote. If things go well, they'll support it, and it'll become an online for whatever length of time. For a sinking fund, it's limited to, I believe it's 10 years, kind of similar to the general operating mill life. A bond millage its life is based upon the underlying debt. So when your whole underlying debt piece of the aggregate debt structure of your school district drives your aggregate life of that, so there's a little difference there. Sinking funds are a pay-as-you-go program. So you'd levy once a year, whatever revenue comes in. There's no debt tied to it. You take that revenue and you go buy and spend it on the things that are legally allowable for a sinking fund. Bonds are just that. You're asking your community to support the issuance of a bond, so that's a big project orientation. And there's outstanding debt tied to that, the bonded debt. So the millage that you'd be levying would be funding used to pay off the debt service, if you will, of the bond. So that's your principal and interest payment each year for the life of the bond. So those sometimes run, depending upon how you structure those could run from 15 years to 25 years. Those are really bond issue timing specific. So the real difference between them from what you're legally allowed to spend that money on is there used to be an old rule of thumb for sinking funds. If you took a school building, turned it upside down and shook it, whatever didn't fall out, you can spend sinking fund dollars on. The laws changed a bit in the last few years, so that rule still applies, meaning you can HVAC units, brick and mortar. You can't buy maintenance items. You can't pay people with that kind of money. You can't buy supplies for, teaching supplies or anything like that. But the last few years, they've added to allowable expenses. You can buy buses and you can buy technology. So those are the two caveats that go along with the other piece. In the bond world, you can buy everything in a building. In both of these cases, you can't pay salaries with them. You can't pay for anything that's maintenance related. So if you've got a maintenance contract, you can't legally use bond or sinking fund dollars because it's maintenance. That should be in your general fund side of things. But if you need to replace motors in a system that have burned out that need repairing, you can spend either dollars on those, that kind of thing. So this world, from a 30,000-foot view, that's about as deep as you want to go because it gets into the weeds quick because they all have their own nuances. And one of the nuances that we actually have here in the district is called the school loan revolving fund that's associated with our bonds in the district. And I think I've touched on this in prior meetings, a little bit of an overview, but this is kind of a restatement of some of the information I've gone over before. Really, the program is the Michigan State program that was created a long time ago. I want to say in the 50s comes to mind. I could be wrong on that. The goal of it was to help smaller tax-based districts afford bigger bond projects. So in today's age, I mean, you're going to spend $100 million to build a new high school, maybe more. And in most districts, the tax base in them cannot afford it. So the idea when this originally came out back in its day was, all right, instead of having to come up with a millage that you would ask your community to pay like 15 mils, I mean, could you imagine that? Come vote for our bond, we're only going to charge you 15 mils. They have this program in place that says if you charge a certain level, like you have to be charging or levying at least 7 mils, and we're at 7.9 in our district, you can belong to this fund. There's an application process, and there's actually an actual contract related to it. It's somewhere along the line. And that allowed you to borrow from this program. So, and the reason you want to do that, say that 7.9 mils that we're levying only generates 90% of the debt service we need for the amount of bonded debt we want to borrow to build whatever. The other 10% you borrow through the school loan fund to pay your debt service. And let's say that the life of the bonded debt was 20 years. So for the next 20 years, theoretically, you're borrowing a little bit of school bond loan money and you're levying your taxes and you're paying off your bond. So in years 21 and 22, you would still do 2 full levies. You'd use that to pay off your outstanding school loan revolving fund loan debt money. So in effect, what it's doing is stretches out payments on a bond to keep it quote-unquote affordable for districts that don't have bigger tax bases. You know, like a Troy, I mean, they issued a $500 million bond a couple of years ago. They got no problem supporting bonded debt. You go north of us, that's a whole different story. So, I mean, that was the idea and thinking behind it. So, this gets us to, from a overview of program and budget, how it interacts with the budgeting process and some of the finance world. Our district, I think I touched on earlier, we run our seated regular programming in our schools. We also have a shared time program that we run, a virtual academy program that we run, and we're connected with Lighthouse Connection Academy that we authorize. So from a 30,000-foot view, the shared time service, again, all of these programs have their lots of ability to go into the weeds. So from a 30,000 square foot view, from a shared time program point of view, schools have different classes that are categorized as either core or non-core. So if it's a non-core class, like an art or a music or a gym, they qualify under the shared time service program. So for St. Joe's, for instance, if they have a gym program and they need a gym teacher, we can give them a gym teacher that we're paying. And the trade-off is, or the trade-back is, we get to count the kids that gym teacher is teaching in our state aid. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really a win-win for all kids involved. A lot of the smaller privates and parochials just can't afford a lot of the stuff that public schools can. So the program over the years has kind of expanded. So from a simple point of view, it really boils down to, we'll staff these non-core courses. We'll get to count the kids in state aid. And the goal is to do it where we're providing them a service that is very beneficial to the smaller organizations, the parochials and the privates that can't afford it. We get to count the state aid. We generate an excess revenue over that. That excess revenue is plowed back into our facilities and our kids' programming here in district. The virtual program here, it's similar in terms of the big picture of operations, but you can have different variations of the type. So our virtual model here provides educational services and curriculum to support the needs of our resident kids as well as kids across the state. Because it's virtual, you can literally go across the state. So in terms of the same kind of concept, we incur costs associated for teaching, we incur costs associated for virtual curriculum, that kind of stuff. Some equipment costs. We generate a state aid count because we get to count those kids. The state aid dollar value that's generated generates an excess revenue over the total cost, and we turn around and take that excess revenue to support our seated in-district standard programming. Lighthouse Connections is a little bit different. Public schools are one of the agencies that can authorize an academy. Universities and public schools do it across the state. We've authorized, and this has been authorized a while back, I can't off the top of my head, and I'm thinking about it, can't think of when we actually started doing this. 2018. Thank you. So Lighthouse Connections Academy is, we've authorized them. So the difference here between the other two kind of programs is we're having a compliance oversight role. So for having that oversight role, we get to charge them a fee. And the fee's based on upwards of, you can go up to 3% of the state aid that the academy generates. Every district goes up to 3%. And so for Lighthouse Academy, they'll generate state aid. It passes through us so we can, that's the state given control from our point of view. So whoever's authorizing them, the academy's state aid passes through them. So there's a control point so that they know that the authorizer is getting their fee, and then the balance gets transferred from the authorizing district to the Lighthouse Academy in our case. What we do with that fee, our obligation is there's a set out amount of compliance activities that we have to do, and we do annually. Allison falls under Allison's territory. And that's another type of program that we accomplish those compliance activities at a cost that's less than the fee we charge. Again, that excess revenue gets plowed back into our district operating and buildings programs and regular curriculum programming. So that's the 30,000-foot view. At a future date, or maybe the finance subcommittee, if you want to tear into a deeper level on any of this stuff, I would be more than thrilled to take you way into the weeds, because that's the morning, that'll be easy to put everybody to sleep. And/or if there's anything like that you want, we could add to a future presentation for if there's more desire to see something different. But the goal here, and I hope I, aside from getting everybody to nod off, the goal here is to get some basic understanding of terminology, why we do what we do, that kind of stuff. Any questions? And if there are no questions, that means I did my job.
Fantastic job. That was very, very thorough and educational, and we appreciate it.
Now, do you want me to just go right into the bid stuff?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be great.
Yeah, you do have two bid first readings on the agenda tonight. First one's related to our boilers. We've got 2 boilers at the OEIC facility and 1 at Lakeview. We approached them from what's known as the emergency status point of view because they are boilers. They're the means to keep the buildings warm in the middle of winter. That gives you the authority to streamline some activity. If this were the middle of the summer and we were doing this, we would have to draw up plans, pass it through the state. You've heard this story before. It would take them 12 weeks to approve the plans, and then we can go do the fixes. The emergency model allows you to go do the fixes and then simultaneously start the state approving plans, because boilers are pretty cut and dried in terms of what needs to be done. So those are the kinds of things you'll typically see. Even the roof has been done on that model. The only problem with the roof is that it took forever to turn around at the state, because we did start in the summer on that, as opposed to if that occurred in the winter, we would have had an argument to do otherwise. But so those boilers are out there. There's the pricing of the boiler itself is off the Omnia cooperative contract pricing. So this contract meets the state's compliance rules for purchasing, pricing, and meeting bid aspect of the equipment piece. The overall bid really is covering the cost of that equipment and the cost to install them. So that's why they show up as a standalone bid before the board tonight. So we did get 3 installation vendors who were invited to make proposals. We got 2, we did get 3 back on that because we pulled them out through the Omni group, and we were working with our architect to coordinate that piece. Working through all that, the winning vendor, or the proposed, the recommended winning vendor is I always kill the name here, Thermalnetics. And based upon the way they rated on their paperwork, wasn't quite sure if that's 2 words or 1 from the name of their company point of view. So from that perspective, these projects would be funded out of our capital projects fund. And so it's recommended that the Board of Education authorize to execute the contract with Thermalnetics in the amount of $219,832 and allocate a contingency amount of $22,000 for a total authorization of $241,832. The contingency is not tied to the contract. That's just pre-authorization that we're requesting, that because this boiler replacement is tantamount to renovation, you never know for sure what you're going to find. So it's an ask to say, okay, if we find a problem that we didn't see until we actually tore the equipment out, that's the pre-authorization to use the $22,000 to get it all done instead of stop and coming back to the board and that kind of stuff. So that you'll see that too in some of the bid stuff going forward. And then the other one is the OEIC kitchen project. So the scope there was more complex than just boiler pieces. So it addressed the kitchen hood and all the venting work. I'm not sure if anybody's actually has gone through the actual kitchen there, but when you walk in, you'll see exactly what it is, what we're talking about. So there's a hood, venting work, equipment replacement going on. There's grease traps, and in any kitchen, there's grease traps. These need to be replaced and moved. So that's a big piece of the actual tearing up of the ground, because they're in-ground grease traps. There's a little bit of wall movement a very small movement, but it's in the mix. There's going to be some ceiling tile replacement, going to replace the roof, lighting, fire alarm systems, and some other physical upgrades. It's very clear that area of the building, much like probably the rest of the building, hasn't been addressed from a physical update or physical needs point of view for a long time. So in this mix also, there's an alternate to do the subsequent floor tiling work, tearing out the old stuff, putting in new stuff. So the bid itself is a request to approve both pieces. The main piece, from a cost point of view, is $695. Let me pull my number out here. I didn't bring that out here. It's $695 associated with the main construction work, and then $79,000 associated with the tile work, and that's referred to as alternate one. Because we're tearing so much of the floor up, it's almost tantamount that we have to go with alternate one. We just want to have the ability to peel a piece out. So the pricing, along with our contingency request, gets it up to an $800,000 cost issue. That's before we've got a planned, we're working with a vendor to get a planned reduction. We're changing some scope. So in the end, there's going to be a reduction of that of about $75,000 associated with the pricing. From a planning point of view, we estimated in the ballpark for the main piece, the first piece, about $500,000 for the project. It came in $695, but that was the low bid. The other one was, I want to say, it was between the two was about a $50,000 difference between the two vendors that actually put a bid on. We did have 12 different vendors come in and have interest. And typically this time of year, or used to be typically pre-COVID, this would be a slower time for this size of for a vendor, and you get your better pricing, and you get more people providing bids and reaction. We got two, and in a great degree, we're happy to get two, because it's work that's got to be done. Not happy with the pricing, being a prisoner of the moment and being a prisoner of what's going on in the markets there. I want to think that when we talked, what we had estimated the pricing to be, we were thinking still 2019 as opposed to full scale 2024. And I think there's more work out there. So this time period is probably not the slump time period in the old days, pre-20 days. It used to be. So that is the first reading piece on that one. I'm more than happy to ask any questions or answer any questions on that one.
Were there any questions on those two items? I had one on the boilers, and maybe I missed this somewhere, but for the Thermalnetics, what, is it, the warranty, is it only 30 days of labor warranty, or is there an equipment warranty?
There's an equipment warranty, because the equipment is being purchased through the Omni contract that comes with its own set of warranties. They're giving a 30-day warranty on their work.
Do you know what the warranty is? The other, just because the other quote included that there was a 12-month warranty, but there wasn't, that was not included on the Thermalnetics one. So do you happen to know that, or could you get that
I can find
for
that
next
out.
time?
I can find that out. Yep.
Perfect.
The big focus that we did have on that was the equipment warranty piece of it. When it comes to the installation piece, you know right away if it's working right. So, and then, let me give you a couple of quick, if you don't mind, a couple of quick updates on a couple other things that are going on in the
Absolutely.
district. So, there's good and there's bad. So I'm going with good first. The OAC roof project status, thank God on this one. The trusses are delivering at the end of this month. The target is January 30th. The actual trusses coming on property. Work is scheduled to begin on January 31, weather permitting. If it starts within 3 or 4 days of that, I'll be thrilled. And then they're targeting completion by end of February. If everything goes good, it'll be mid-February. But you know how things go, it'll be end of February. And that piece will be taken care of, and we can take that off the radar, so to speak. The bad piece, the Sunday, January 19th, we had a electrical equipment problem at the middle school. For lack of a better description, the power coils, the transformer that's inside the building, there's a primary and a secondary where the main big huge power lines come in. Something occurred somewhere along the way that caused a problem with those. The more we're digging into it, and we've been working with our electrical contractor, and the insurance company's going to send their people out. They're actually probably going to be out by the end of this week to look at their perspective on stuff. I did get a little bit of good news there that our equipment, small chance it's not burned out, small chance it can be repaired. This is a very challenging project. We did get a tractor trailer sized generator brought into the back of the building by the end of the day that Sunday. So the building's powered, our network systems are powered, all that's good. So we won't have an interruption for power reasons. The continuous renting of the generator is expensive. So the sooner that gets done, original timelines that have been talked about getting this fixed could be up to 2 months. There are doing other tests to determine exactly what the specific causation issue is to repair it, and then also determining if our existing equipment has been damaged beyond repair. If it's damaged beyond repair, that's very old equipment, nobody makes it anymore. If we wanted to do a piece-for-piece replacement, it's got a year lead time to have it built. So if it is that, we won't be doing that route. We'll be likely buying newer equipment, setting up if you picture at the back side of the building, dropping down a cement pad, dropping down a new modern transformer, running heavy wiring back under the pavement of the back drives behind the building, back into the building. That, if we go that route, that's what will be done within two months. So this balance of this week, we're hoping to identify exactly what happened and exactly what it means that we need to do to A, not have it happen again, and B, fix what damage it did. It also damaged the in-building generator. It had a cascading effect to some degree. So that's in the mix too. That's an easier fix. I mean, that's an old generator, but we think we can find a used part replacement kit for it. So that's all in process. As I learn more about that, I'll bring that, probably keep, the subcommittee brought up to date, and if there's any big ticket pricing involved, the board, you'll be the second to know after the subcommittee, meaning you'll see it in the bid coming up. So that was the not good news. So that's it. I probably should have did that in reverse so I could end it on good news. What's that?
For the boiler for OEIC, it is 2 boilers?
Yeah, both boilers are being replaced.
I see it says boilers.
Yeah, so there's
But I
two
guess-
at OEIC, one at Lakeville.
Okay. I don't know if I see it like itemized. Okay. And then we'll talk on Friday.
Okay, we can, if you get on the list, we'll dig into it on Friday.
Do we have a ballpark figure for the middle school?
No, I wouldn't want to put something out in public because it could, no, as soon as I get a good idea of what we're really, then we can come up with some kind of estimates. I'm trying to think positive about it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a quick question, yeah.
Sure.
Do we have either a daily or a monthly estimated cost for running the generator?
Yes, it's about $12,000 a week. So the sooner we get a resolution, the better. That's,
The best case scenario, right, is if it were something that is covered by insurance and those costs would be.
yeah,
absorbed.
In my mind, it should be covered by insurance, but you just never know.
Sure.
Because it's old equipment, there's,
Okay, well, everybody cross your fingers.
thank you.
John.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to Human Resources, Ms. Ryan Reed.
Erin. Okay, good evening, Board of Education and community listening in at home. I am Ryan Reed, and I'm honored to serve in the role of Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. I'm here tonight to give you an HR staffing update. Quick overview. These are the 4 main points I want to talk about this evening with you. So first, OCS by the numbers. This graphic represents our total 854 employees, and then you can see I've broken it down into groups. We have our OEA teachers, AFSCME bus drivers, monitors, cafe helpers, our OSPA secretaries, paraprofessionals, technology specialists, and everyone. They're all important. I will not read it all to you because you can see it. I would also like to give a big shout out to our third-party contractors, including ABM, who provide custodial, will sub for our subs, our security contractors with Fortis, our OTs and PTs, None of those folks are represented in the 854, and it's just important to recognize them because we need them to do this important work. So thank you to all of those folks and our direct hires as well. So far this year, we have welcomed 81 new employees since July 1st of 2024. Hiring is an ongoing year-round process. Since I started this presentation at the beginning of January, we've already hired at least 6 more folks to that number. We are glad that they are all here. The graphic on this slide is a welcome note that is published to new hires in our HR Thrive monthly newsletter. Next, I'm going to chat with you about retirement and resignations. So this is the number of staff over the last 5 years. And this is through the 2023-24 school year, since we have the complete data set. I am not going to report on current year since it is ongoing, and it'll just look too low. So that's why you'll see 2019 through 2020, all the way up to 2024. This is representative of all staff, so it's not drilled down by employee group. This is all staff of those 854. You can see we've had an increase in retirements in 23-24, as well as resignations. Experts from the Federal Office of Victims of Crime have shared that after mass violence incidents, there is an increase in faculty and staff turnover. We aim to combat this, the effects of vicarious trauma, by having consistent policies and practices that are supportive of staff. This slide represents our turnover rate as a percentage, a 5-year trend from 1920 through 23-24. Turnover is calculated by dividing the number of retirements and resignations by the average number of employees during that year. So for 23-24, we're at 14.4%. Again, this is representative of all staff in the district. It's not drilled down by employee group, but I will share with you in 23-24 school year regarding teachers, we had 22 leave, so that puts our teacher turnover rate at 5.65, which is below the state average, which was at 10%. So we are in a really healthy condition in terms of teachers. We have had other staff turnover, but that is to be expected for a number of reasons, specifically what I shared with you regarding the last slide. And we are expecting some more turnover as the last class graduates this upcoming year. So I will continue to bring you a 5-year trend on that, and also drill down more specifically to show you information specific to teachers. I do want to share another fact with you. Teachers entering Michigan's public school workforce in the years 21 and 22 outnumber those who left. So we're seeing good trends statewide. People are entering the profession. We're in a healthy range. We're below the average state turnover in teachers. So I think that's important data to share with the board this evening. Next, I'd like to talk with you about the exit survey. The slide represents a brief overview of the exit survey. As staff depart, we ask them to share feedback with us. I want to make sure it is known that this is an optional process for staff to participate in with us. We look forward to always listening to their feedback, analyzing, and improving in the future. Our largest group of respondents are professional staff members, so teachers and other certified staff, 41.4% respondents on this survey. And this is over time. This has been ongoing. We revamped the survey last year, so the data includes from last year forward. And our largest group of respondents include staff from Oxford High School at 29.3%. Top reasons for departure include better opportunities for growth, rate of pay, retirement, great for those folks moving on into retirement, and then stress or burnout. I will talk a little bit more about better opportunities for growth in a few slides. Also, again, I just want to remind you, this data represents all staff, so rate of pay, we have folks working in hourly positions, so we're always aiming to remain competitive throughout every employee group. Good news is that 87.9% of respondents would recommend Oxford Community Schools to a friend as a place to work, so I think that's a point of pride for us. Next, this slide shows our Pulse survey results from November 2024. And these are a little bit small, so I will just read them to you briefly. The orientation in orange and red, we have strongly disagree and disagree. Our greens are either agree or strongly agree. So number 1, the district prioritizes my health and well-being. 82% of our employees either agreed or strongly agreed. 2, I am aware of resources available to manage stress and to support my mental health. 93% of employees either agreed or strongly agreed. I feel sense of belonging in my workplace is question 3, and 83% of our employees agreed with that. Again, these are points of pride that folks are feeling engaged. In the red and orange categories, we take their feedback. We gathered free-form data as well from respondents, and our wellness committee is digging into the data at the next meeting. We were postponed due to the snow day last week, but we look forward to the opportunity as a team to dig into the data and create action steps moving forward. This next slide is just a continuation of that 6-question pulse survey. So working at Oxford Community Schools gives me a sense of purpose. 91% of staff either agreed or strongly agreed. Next, there are people at my workplace who genuinely care about me and my well-being. 94% of staff either agreed or strongly agreed. Our biggest area for improvement is I am aware of the Employee Assistance Program and the type of help it provides. We had 78% of staff agree or disagree, either agree or strongly agree. This was our biggest area of growth on our last pulse survey as well. And with that rate of turnover, we're seeing about 9-10% new staff each year. This is an ongoing challenge that we will work on to make sure that the word is out about the EAP, because it's a great resource. It's free, it's available to every employee, regardless of full-time, part-time status, and members of their household. So anyone living under their roof is eligible for mental health support. I think that's critical. I've said it before up here, so I'm sorry I have to make that plug again, because it's just a great resource for our employees and their families. And these are fun photos I wanted to share with you of well-being in action. In January, we had an underground staff spirit week, and you can see the days that our staff participated in. Monday was anything but a cup. Tuesday, socks and sandals. You can see our teachers there with their socks and sandals. Then on Wednesday, we had our monochrome day. You can see the OEIC staff out front representing, and we had favorite holiday on Thursday. Colleen Rouse-Rutan there representing Christmas. And then Friday was hat and jersey day, and we had some very excited Lions fans over at OELC. So that's just a fun slide to show you our well-being work in action, and our staff have given us a lot of feedback. They enjoy the morale building that comes from having monthly spirit days. So thank you all for participating, and we look forward to having more of those. Lastly, I'm going to chat with you about Oxford Community Schools and our partnership with Talent Together. I presented to the board previously about our partnership. It's so unique. It started in the 23-24 school year, and there's 56 ISDs supported by the Michigan Educator Workforce Initiative and 18 colleges and universities. It's such a point of pride for me to be involved in this program because it gives staff the opportunity to grow. And I wanted to mention from the other slide, people leave because they're looking for opportunities for growth. So this is such an amazing program. You can see the timeline. All staff are offered this opportunity. It is for certificated teachers to add an endorsement so they have career growth. It can be for a bus driver or a paraprofessional who wants to be a teacher one day. As you can see, this graphic here shows our latest email from December of 24, and we highlighted some pathways that are available. We always need special education teachers. Secondary math and science are hard to staff, and ESL. And we sent that out to all staff. So I'm just super proud that we promote from within, we grow our own, and this partnership has enabled us because it gives us full funding. Last year, the 23-24 school year, we had our first year of the Teacher Apprentice Program, the first in Michigan. We had 7 apprentice teachers. 2 of them were hired into full-time positions, are serving in the district currently. Our issue was we didn't have enough open positions for the teachers, so we still have 2 that have continued on in other roles, and 3 have left for positions in other districts. and those are all elementary teachers. So we're just really proud of that opportunity for staff to continue to grow, and we have this unique partnership with Talent Together. So finally, I just want to touch on our November 2024. We have 24 staff members who are currently enrolled with Talent Together. They are pursuing math, science, special ed learning disabilities, cognitive impairment, emotional impairment, autism, and elementary education. And again, these are areas that are extremely hard to staff. So we're investing in our own people and growing them, which will lead to higher employee satisfaction and hopefully decreased turnover in the future. And applications for cohort 3 closed in January 2025, so we look forward to more staff participating in the program and our future partnership with Talent Together. So with that, that's all I have this evening. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just thank you very much, Ryan. You answered my questions that I had as we went, so
Okay.
thank you very much for a thorough presentation.
Great update. Thank you again, Ryan.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm so used to just watching and enjoying. Up next, Dr. Williman.
I am bringing forth the School of Choice memo, so I don't have a presentation. It is that we are recommending the following enrollment for School of Choice applicants. This would be for first semester next school year, so the 25-26 school year. For developmental kindergarten through 9th grade, it would be unlimited, and that enrollment would open March 1st and close on August 14th. For 10th and 11th grade, it would be unlimited for those who would enter the IB, Health Science, Engineering Academy, Dance Conservatory, or Early College. And that window is the exact same, March 1st through August 14th. And then developmental kindergarten through 12th grade, unlimited for OVA. Unlimited School of Choice enrollment will open March 1st and close August 14th. And then this is just the presentation tonight, and then next meeting you will vote. And then just a reminder, in accordance with our board policy, we do take into account any disciplinary history, and Kathy Rastigue, our enrollment specialist, does an excellent job of reaching out to the other schools when it's School of Choice and digging into it and talking to us, and we work with the other principals to ensure that they're in compliance with what our board policy is. So, any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we do have a motion for the first reading. If somebody would like to, Mike Whitney? Oh, well, I took that as yes.
Move to approve the first reading of Schools of Choice for fall of 2025 as presented.
Support. James? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Unscheduled public comment. Do we have any? No? Okay. I do just want to mention real quick before we jump into the next one that there was an item on the agenda that was removed. I'm sure you all noticed the letter, and because of developments over the past 24 hours, I thought it was best that we table this. We will bring it back absolutely at the next meeting, but I didn't want any hastily made changes, and I think it needs to be a bit more appropriate given current conditions. So just wanted to tell you all that. So would somebody like to make a motion for closed session?
Okay. Here we go. Meet in closed session pursuant to Open Meetings Act, Section 8C, for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement if either negotiating party requests a closed session, and Section 8E, to consult with its attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with case numbers 23-1483, 23-1563, 23-1489, 23-1565, 23-1484, 23-1487, 23-1561, 23-1490, 23-1491, 23-1564, 23-1492, 23-1493, 23-1560, 23-1496, 24-13152, MSC pound, number 167744, MSC number 167746, 24-211021-NO, 24-21120221-NO, 24-211225-NO, 24-211234-NO, 24-211240-NO, and 24-211207-CZ pursuant to MCL 15.268E.
Support. Shane Gibson, thank you. We will need, any discussion? No? Okay. James, we'll need a roll call vote.
Yep, roll call vote, I need a yes or no. Summers, yes. Atchison?
Yes.
Aldred?
Yes.
Sarabeth?
Yes.
Whitney?
Yes.
Gibson?
Yes.
McDonough?
Yes. All right, it is 9:01, and we are moving into closed session. All right, welcome back. It is 10:16. We are returning from closed session. Do we have any administrative clarification, Dr. Milligan? No? And any final board comments? No? Okay, there are scheduled activities listed. We have winter break coming up, and also a few more Board of Education meetings. Just want to remind everybody, if you haven't had your committee meetings, to get those scheduled. And it is 10:17 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.